Well, can I welcome everyone here today. We're going to walk from here, we're just going to stroll along the road, and we're going to cross over to Kenfig Castle. Now, no history lesson today other than to say we always believe that the pub itself, which is so popular with us all, was actually built first of all in the 16th century. So it's some 500 years old, this one we believe, and I'll tell you more about that when we get back. But today, when we walk across to Kenfig Castle, that it said has an early origin. It's even believed it was back to the 11th century, but it was certainly built as a stone castle at the time of the Norman lords of Cardiff Castle, because the famous Fitzsalmon family, Robert Fitzsalmon, and his son, who was always known as Robert Consul, who actually died in 1147, and they used to own the land all the way from Cardiff right up, it said, to the River Kenfig. And at that time, when it was rebuilt in the 13th century, the castle itself, Kenfig, because it was believed it was perhaps first built in the 11th century, but just as a wooden structure. But it was only later on in the Norman period when it was really strengthened. And it became the centre of an area when the medieval community was first built up. And when we go over to the castle today, literally there's only a few ruins of the old Motte and Bailey, as they call it. I mean, if you go to Cardiff Castle, you know the wonderful structure of that centre, which they call the Motte and Bailey, the stone structure. Well, that apparently was mirrored down here, but all we've got are a few ruins. But it's quite nice to see the area because we just don't know whereabouts it is. So we're going to have a look at that. We'll wend our way through there, and then after that, we're going to circle around onto a slightly higher spot, around which we believe was the area where the community lived, the Kenfig community. Jeff would probably know more about this when we get over there than I do, but I know it is said in all the documentation that the community was there. I mean, many people think it's under the pool, but as I understand it, it is in fact very. And when they had the time team down here, they in fact were excavating over there. So I think we can be assured, because they did in fact excavate very thoroughly.
We started our walk at the Prince of Wales car park, Mowdlam. We walked about 2 miles today, walking down the main road and across the dunes here. This is Kenfig Castle. Then we walked back across the dunes to the Prince of Wales.
What I'd like you to do now, we've come about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, with the contours now, you see, just rising up to where that's the dual carriageway, which we see running in towards Margam. There's a bridge. No. All right, the M4 motorway. I saw you are right. Now, can anyone pick out where Kenfig Castle is? It's not easy. Stuart's saying over here. Over here, no, Stuart's not right, but it looks like one or two of you are veering slightly to the right. Well done. I mean, it is in that direction, and congratulations for finding it, because it's not easy. Can you see the greener area, which looks as if it might have been a cricket field? Well, if you're looking directly, have a look at the green shed to the right, not the bright green one, but the other green shed. Now, right in line with that, now you're probably picking up the ruins of Cardiff Castle, forgive me, of Kenfig Castle. So we're going to wend our way now just around here on the right-hand side and go up towards Kenfig Castle, and we'll say a little bit more about how it was attacked and how it was defended in those early days. But again, another thing is just to look at the sheer extent of the dunes, which you look over here. We're way away from the sea now because we're hugging this area, which is where the motorway lies. But right on the far side, you can see the dunes stretching right across to the River Kenfig. I think, Jeff, the Kenfig runs, doesn't it? Jeff, a word about the River Kenfig itself.
A lot bigger river. And the inlet was where the castle is. That the Roman built a fort along here, and the inlet from the sea came right up to there. So boats with shallow drafts could come all the way up to where the castle is.
And do we know when that was? That about
Roman times?
Yeah, in Roman times. Well, but it was actually coming as early as that.
This was the western boundary of the Romans and the Normans.
Yeah.
Because the Welsh, they were a funny lot over there. Used to keep attacking them. Didn't like it. Don't like it, Upham.
Well, I know it said there was an occupation here right back, I think, as far as the Bronze Age. When's that? From 2000 to 500 BC, and then the...
Oh yeah, there was all that sort of the old people. But the Romans actually, they did go further west because they were taking gold from up near Carmarthen. We had gold mines up near Carmarthen.
Not the Dolly Coffee.
That's the ones, yeah. Very interesting up there, yeah.
Does anybody else know this area well over here in the dunes? Anyone strolled around, had any walks around here? All right, well, we'll carry on our little walk.
A little tragedy happened here a couple of years ago. Just overhead here, two aircraft collided. Whoops. Collided from St. Athan with two cousins on board and two instructors.
Beautiful afternoon for us to wander along here, and I'm always amazed when we get to that castle and we just sit. All you've got are ruins there now, but the history which is associated with that. We shall actually go a little bit further and go on to one of the higher dunes, just so we can have a look at the sheer size of them again.
Well, as you see the size down there, were all those sand dunes, they were fields that produced crops and all the rest of it in Norman times when the castle was built. This was quite a productive area, as long as the climate, they had decent weather. They obviously had some bad harvests. But all this where you see now was fields, agricultural fields, right the way down to the sea. So it was quite a productive area, particularly during what they called the medieval optimum climate, between about 1050 and about 1250. It was a much warmer period and produced quite a lot of wealth for the country. This is why the country was quite wealthy in those days, and they managed to build a lot of cathedrals or start a lot of cathedrals because they had the money to do it.
But the castle itself, Jeff, that was owned by the English influenced lord, wasn't he? And the native people often saw it as something which they would attack.
It was a sublet. It was a sublet, as was Sturmey Castle, just up the road towards by Stormy Down. There's Sturmey Castle up there, just up this valley. And it was like a sub-landlord. He wasn't the big chief. He was a cousin or a nephew or whatever. And also he had his little domain, which he got the rents for, and then paid the upper man, and the money all ended up with the king or whoever it was at the time.
And we believe the population was something like 1,500, 2,000?
No, I think 700 was a maximum estimate for the population of Kenfig itself.
And then the time when the sea flooded over here, and it became...
the sand.
Well, the sand, the sea didn't run over. It was just the sand. Is that right?
Just the sand blew in. Yeah. So it started about just after the Black Death went through the country in the 1340s. About 1340, 1350s, they got attacked with the Black Death coming from the east and the sand coming from the sea, and it gradually encroached over the centuries. It wasn't a one night sort of thing. It was gradually coming in, and they started losing all the fields and all the production, and abandoned it in the end.
And then the people moved up here into the higher ground.
Well, obviously it got less and less because it couldn't support the number of people, so the population diminished, and as people went elsewhere, and then eventually they just abandoned it altogether.
So about the time of the Tudors, was that right? About Henry VII, Henry VIII, then they moved up, and now the administrative buildings was the Prince of Wales.
I don't know about the Prince of Wales. I've only been there for a drink. I don't know about administration. John, you'd know more about that.
Well, we'll have a look at that after when we get back. Have a look at that, because there is a fascinating history to the Prince of Wales. But we'll have a look at that. Right, we'll continue our stroll around here, and next stop will be the castle itself. We're approaching the Sphinx at the moment. It looks very much like Lawrence will pan around and see if we can pick it up. You'll see our group of walkers that are now approaching it. It really is just a small ruin. That's all we got left. A little bit of the old original motte and bailey, but around it are the surrounds and the thick walls, largely now covered with shrubs and greenery. But we will have a look around there, and then we're going to have a look at the height of the dunes to have a look at where we believe the buried town of Kenfig originally was. Just a word. We've arrived now at the castle, and we're going to have a look around this area. But we're right at the very spot where the famous Kenfig Castle was in fact built, and as I said, as a stone building, was in fact, we believe, built at the time of the mid 13th century during the reign of Robert the Consul, who was the famous son of the first King of England, the first Norman King of England, Henry I, 1100 to 1135. But Robert Fitzhamon, they were strongly associated. Henry I was often visiting this area, apparently, and the Norman lords were extremely strong. They owned the land around here, and this was one of the castles, stone castle, that was built. But the records now, Stuart, we understand are elsewhere, aren't they?
The entire archaeological records are contained in a small case in the Kenfig offices. All that could be found by the recent dig.
Oh, fine. So the time team, when they came and presented.
Well, I'm not sure whose it was, but the point to be made is that when the town was finally evacuated, they took everything.
And the Kenfig offices you referred to being
where we met.
Oh, in the Prince of Wales, they're all there.
No, in the offices at the Kenfig Nature Reserve.
Oh, in there. Fine. Thanks very much then. Well, I think most of us know where they are. You know, where we often do, in fact, meet the Kenfig Reserve, and sometimes we go in the dunes in the other direction. But the surrounding area, Jeff, the whole of this was, in fact, very close in proximity to the town itself, was it?
It was just to the other side from where we are now. In actual fact, the first two castles, as you mentioned before, were wooden, at least maybe 2 or 3, built in the 1140s, and both were burnt down. And then in about the 1160s, they started building a stone one. I think that was attacked. Altogether, this place was attacked, ravaged and knocked down about 9 times by these wicked Welsh people.
Do you mean the Llewellyn Brens and the Owen Glyndwrs?
That's the ones, that lot, yes. No respect for anything.
Well, this is a great rivalry, apparently, so it's said that the local Welsh people didn't think too highly of those who managed or controlled the castle itself. And over the years, these wonderful names. I think there's another one, Morgan Ap... Morgan Ap... was it Talbot or something like that?
Yeah, but to link it with Porthcawl, 1185-87 was finally finished as a brick building or a stone building at about the same time as Newton Church was completed. So the original brick or stone building here is you can compare it to Newton Church, and look at that. I mean, that's still standing and doing a good job.
Well, I think that invites us now to have a look around at some of these stone buildings. If anybody fancies climbing at one or two of these, I'm not going to stop anyone, but just be careful, because there's a fairly big hole just down here, and I don't want to see anyone disappearing down there. But we'll explore around and have a look now. If you just look back up here, up towards, you can see the top of what would have been the inner fortress of the castle. And if you look back about the 13th century, that was the height of it. And this probably ran along here. You can see this wall here as well, which is probably the outer wall of what you call the bailey. So you have the inner moat bit, and it's first of all, it appears that the moat would have been running along there. But then for about another 60 feet, this bailey area would have been built where the members of the Roman castle were themselves living, those who worked and served around here. But then when we go outside, that's where we see where the people of Kenfig were living. But they were not associated with the people who lived in here, other than having to do more or less what they were told. But from time to time, the attacks took place, which had the support very often of the local people. And that's why we hear the names of, such as Llewellyn the Last, Llewellyn the Great, certainly Llewellyn Bren in 1350, and the famous name that everyone remembers, Owen Glyndwr in 1405, when they say that this castle was finally a challenge for the last time. And whether or not it was totally pillaged and ruined at that time, or whether or not this is the subsequent result of the sand coming over here, there's a bit of uncertainty there. But this is the old Cardiff Kenfig Castle as it was. It was famous in its time, as is the area that we're now going to have a look at to see where the submerged town in all probability was. In fact, we know it was because of the work of the time team. So we'll have a look at that.
Find a way, and when they reached out, the wall was growing together.
But that's it, Jeff. But it seems very likely, as Jeff was saying, this could be the boat area, well the outer boat seems like they might be. But we're actually going to tread on where
recceing with a small aircraft, taking pictures of it.
This river.
No, when you go further down, if you follow this river down, about 2 miles from the sea, the steelworks are encroaching. They fill for the spoil and stuff from the blast furnaces. They filling it all in and flattening it out, presumably to build some more industrial stuff in the future.
We're just looking over here. The river itself flowing just down. This is the River Kenfig, which is right adjacent to the castle over there. It's just a very, very small river, isn't it? Here at this point. Where does it rise?
If you follow it, I don't know, up towards Tondee way, I suppose.
On the other side of the motorway.
Yeah. If you follow the valley up, it goes up towards Tondee, I think. I don't know if you know that area.
Anybody good on the River Kenfig? Anyone know where the River Kenfig rises? Anybody good on the River Kenfig? Know where it rises? Right, that's our challenge for next time. We've got to find out where. Jeff thinks it probably is around Tondee, that area, but we're not sure.
Some of the hills around there.
But again, this was an important sort of part, because as Jeff has said earlier, just to remind us, Jeff, it wasn't true that the boat section merchandise...
It's silted up a lot now, obviously, but in the past, before the sand and everything blew in, it was open to the sea. The sea was much closer as well, because that's all silted up and piled up with sand dune. And so there was you could get into this place, which was a Roman frontier place. I suppose they charged people going through and what have you, and stop who goes there and how much it was per cow to get through. But this was the frontier at one time, and I'm not sure where the Roman ruins were, where the castle's built on the actual Roman site, but it was in this area. And of course, if you look at the road, goes over Stormy Down. That was the old Roman road.
Because when the Romans first came here, didn't they always, the Normans, who divided up the area into about 7 separate entities, and this one was, I think, extended from Cardiff Castle, was it right through here into the river, as you say, to the River Kenfig, and this was under the control of the Lord of the Castle from Cardiff, and was administered by burgesses who were given a specific responsibility by the Lord of the Castle.
Well, the initial thrust when the Normans invaded in 1066 and then came further east, it was stopped after Henry I's time, at the end of his reign, when King Stephen took over, who was King Henry I's grandson, I think, or maybe son, when Matilda should have been the queen. And then there was civil war for years, and she cleared off. And so everything came to a halt because they were all fighting amongst themselves. So the expansion westwards of the Normans stopped because they were all fighting back in England over various things.
You realise you've all got to take O-level history, don't you, after all this? 1135 to 1154, Stephen.
Yes, that's right, and that was virtually civil war.
Just here, I've heard it being said that in all probability this may have been a sort of part line of amphitheatre. Now, I don't. It looks so, but you hear all these different theories, or maybe nothing to do with that. Don't you go? Because at the same time, there's quite a channel running down here.
This is formed by wind-blown sand.
There we are then.
That's all it is wind.
Where from here was the buried village?
Where see the cows? There, all there. Lovely little spot.
All there?
All where the cows are. Yeah, all around there, up towards the castle. Nice flat. There's a river going alongside it for a water source, and to go around to form the moat. And so you had lovely fields. All this was fields, agricultural fields, for corn and grazing and all the rest of it. The sea wasn't too far away. Inlet for the river for trade and goodness knows what. Smashing's a little spot here.
There we are then. Well, here the river, in fact, is on the other side. You can see the bushes. Follow the tree line. That's where the river was, running along here. But all this then would have just been pasture land as well. Agricultural land, pasture land.
Pasture and probably growing cereals.
So we have a theory. Jeff denounces the very concept that this could have been an amphitheatre at all windswept, wind-blown sand, beautiful, looks like an amphitheatre. I'm not sure I let him off entirely, but he's quite convincing. I mean, he's flown all around here, so I'm very cautious about making... I like the romantic idea. Well, as linguists, Brian, together. But we will, in fact, very carefully just go to the top here so we can look back down, where we're quite convinced that Jeff tells us that the buried town lies to this day. So we just go very slowly to the top so we can see the whole lot. Well, here we are. We've crested the top of the dunes here, and on beyond, that is definitely the rough area, or the definite area where the submerged town was.
Where the cattle is, the brown Highland-looking cattle, they look quite old type cattle. That's where the village is, underneath the sand.
And stretched for how long? What's the distance?
These sand dunes here, and back towards where the castle is, which is that clump of trees on the left. And beyond that, you can see obviously the M4, and then the valley goes up to Tondy and around there.
So that's where we think the river flows down from Tondy. There's the river. We can see the river quite clearly now, and the castle in behind the lumps of trees, and the buried town, as we believe it, from that next ridge, way beyond to where the cattle are. So that's where the time team came, Jeff.
Yeah, they dug holes there. Beyond, you can see Kenfig Hill, named after the old Kenfig, and up the valley there, about a mile or so, is a huge open cast mine with a great big lake in it, and it goes underneath here and out to sea. There's a lot of coal here, and if the steel company got round to it and got permission, they'd got an awful lot of coal to keep themselves going. Now all these sand dunes here are stabilised now, are all covered with grass and bushes and all sorts of things. But if you go back about 50, 60 years, this was all blow-in sand. A lot of it was blow-in sand. And it was still getting blown inland. Still moving inland. And the reason is that somebody came along with myxomatosis and killed off all the rabbits, which ate the plants and everything, which didn't allow them to get going and stabilise. But now, without the rabbits, or very few of them, it's all stabilised. And that's why it'll stay this way now, and trees will gradually take over, and off you go.
And we have the benefit of strolling along here as members of the University of the Third Age and remembering what was.
But it's a lovely little spot with the river here for the water and good agricultural land. But you can imagine it when the sand started coming in, and it was slowly encroaching on the fields, and they knew they were doomed. They were doomed as it came in over the decades, over the centuries, until eventually it just came right over the village. But by then they'd all gone.
So here we are now. What would you say? About 3/4 of a mile from the sea here, aren't we?
Oh, a good mile.
Good mile, a mile from the sea. It just shows the extent of the dunes themselves, right across to Porthcawl, to the steelworks, which are about 3 miles to our 3-4 miles to the west. And also that's the carbide. Is that the carbide works? Which works have we got over here? There's a steel company here. There's no works on the right. It used to be British Oxygen, didn't it? Many years ago. And it's over there. And over here, the river, and there, our resting place in a moment, our own resting place, the Prince of Wales, when we go back. coming up to 4 o'clock now, and we're coming to the end of the walk. It's been fairly hard going through the last part because we've had to come through some thatched routes and some overgrown areas, and the paths have been covered over, but it means that everyone's able to see just what these dunes are like. There are many pathways all the way through, but equally there's some very difficult paths to cross. But when we look back now, it really is beautiful. We've had a lovely day. The others are just making their way back to the Prince of Wales. We're going to have a look at the history of the Prince of Wales. But over there, the Kenfig pool, you can see shimmering. We've got the sea on beyond. We've got this great expanse of dunes, the steelworks on beyond, and it really has been a wonderful day for a walk. We've had 11 of us on the walk, and I think everyone's thoroughly enjoyed it, even though I think a few have come back a little bit exhausted and found some of the trekking through the centre part of the dunes maybe a bit more demanding than was possibly thought. But a lovely day for it, and as we said, it's been a real eye-opener, and Jeff's helped us a lot with telling us about the history of Kenfig, and now we're going back just to reflect a little bit on the history of what was the administrative centre of the Prince of Wales.